You know, that specific kind of exhaustion that settles deep in your bones. Not the kind you get from running a marathon or pulling an all-nighter at work. I'm talking about the soul-crushing fatigue of trying to please people who are committed to misunderstanding you. That was me, standing in the middle of the Vance family estate, a sprawling, colonial-style mansion in upstate New York, adjusting a floral arrangement that probably cost more than my first car. It was my parents' 40th wedding anniversary. Richard and Linda Vance. To the outside world, they were the pillars of the community, the perfect couple who had weathered for decades of life with grace and style. To me, they were the people who constantly reminded me that I took up too much space. I'm Camila, by the way. I'm 38 years old, a landscape architect with my own firm, and yet, standing in that ballroom, I felt like I was 8 years old again, waiting for a pat on the head that was never coming. Camila. The hydrangeas are tilting to the left. Honestly, can't you do anything right? My mother's voice cut through the air like a serrated knife. Linda Vance didn't yell, she projected. She swept into the room, a vision in emerald silk, her eyes scanning the venue for flaws. She didn't look at me, she looked at the flowers I had spent 3 hours arranging. I'll fix it, Mom, I said, my voice steady. It's a tone I've perfected over years of therapy. Neutral. Non-combative. Boring. Make sure you do, she sniffed, adjusting her diamond earrings. Your brother will be here soon. I want everything perfect for Brad. He's bringing some very important investors. We need this night to be spectacular. Brad. The golden child. My older brother, 42, who had entrepreneurial ventures in everything from crypto to real estate, yet somehow never seemed to have a permanent address. He was the sun my parents orbited. I was just the gravity that kept their feet on the ground, invisible, necessary, and completely unappreciated. I watched her walk away, greeting the catering staff with a warmth she never showed me. I looked down at my hands. They were rough from working with soil and stone, honest hands that built things. My mother's hands were soft, manicured, and only good for pointing out mistakes. The estate was buzzing. Waiters in white tuxedos were setting up the champagne tower. A string quartet was tuning their instruments in the corner. This house, it was the only thing I truly loved about my family. It belonged to my grandmother, Elena. She passed away 5 years ago. She was the only one who saw me. While my parents and Brad were off vacationing in the Hamptons or skiing in Aspen, I was here, nursing Grandma through her final battle with cancer. I remember the nights sitting by her bedside, listening to the old house creak. This house has a soul, Cammy, she would whisper. It knows who loves it. I shook off the memory. I had work to do. I was essentially the unpaid event planner, coordinator, and punching bag for this party. As I moved to the terrace to check the lighting, I heard voices drifting from the parlor. The French doors were slightly ajar. Richard, do you think she suspects anything? It was my mother's voice. Camila. Please, my father scoffed. The sound of ice clinking against glass followed. She's too busy trying to earn our approval to notice we're selling the ground out from under her. My blood ran cold. I froze, pressing myself against the brick wall. I just hope she doesn't make a scene when we announce it, Mom said. We need the proceeds from the sale to cover Brad's situation. If we don't get that liquidity, he's in trouble. Don't worry, Dad replied, his voice dripping with arrogance. It's my mother's house. I inherited it. I can do whatever I want. Camila can go back to her little apartment. She's strong, she's used to struggling. Brad isn't built for hardship. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. They weren't just selling the house. They were selling Grandma's legacy, my sanctuary, to bail Brad out of yet another mess. And they hadn't even told me. Besides, Mom added, and this was the part that etched itself into my memory forever. May as well put her to use tonight. She's good at serving. It's about the only thing she inherited from my side of the family. They laughed. It wasn't a villainous cackle, it was a casual, dismissive chuckle. The sound of people who didn't fear consequences because they had never faced any. I stood there, the cool evening breeze hitting my face, but I didn't feel it. I felt a heat rising in my chest. A mixture of grief and rage. They thought I was the servant. They thought I was the doormat. But there was one thing Richard and Linda Vance had forgotten. One tiny, legal detail about the inheritance that Grandma and I had locked away in a safe deposit box 5 years ago. I adjusted my black dress, the one Mom said made me look slimmer and less noticeable, and stepped back into the light. Okay, I whispered to myself. Let's start the show. The sound of a high-performance engine roaring up the driveway signaled the arrival of the prince. A sleek, silver Porsche 911 screeched to a halt right in front of the valet stand. The door opened and out stepped Brad. He looked every bit the part of the successful venture capitalist he pretended to be. Italian suit, teeth whitened to a blinding degree, and an air of unearned confidence that followed him like cheap cologne. Mom. Dad, he bellowed, throwing his arms open. My parents practically tripped over themselves to get to him. It was nauseating. It was like watching teenagers meet a pop star. Oh, Bradley. You made it. Mom shrieked, embracing him. Look at you. You look like $1 million. Try 10 million, Mom, Brad winked, tossing the keys to the valet without even looking at him. Keep it close, pal. It's delicate. I stood by the entrance, holding a tray of welcome drinks, not because I had to, but because Mom had waved me over and hissed, make yourself useful. Brad finally noticed me. He looked me up and down, a smirk playing on his lips. Hey, Cammy. Nice dress. Staff uniform. Hello, Brad, I said, keeping my face impassive. Nice car. Rental. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second, his eyes darting away before returning with a harder glare. Lease to own, actually. It's a business expense. You wouldn't understand, landscape gardening doesn't exactly require high finance. It's landscape architecture, I corrected, though I knew it was wasted breath. And it pays for my mortgage. Which is real. Now, children, Dad intervened, clapping Brad on the shoulder. Let's not bicker. Brad has brought us a gift. Brad pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and presented it to Mom. She opened it and gasped. A diamond tennis bracelet. It had to be at least 5 carats. Oh, Bradley. You shouldn't have. Mom teared up. Richard, look. Our son is so generous. Only the best for the woman who made me, Brad said smoothly. I narrowed my eyes. I knew Brad's financials. Or at least, I knew enough to know he didn't have diamond bracelet money legally. 2 years ago he borrowed $20,000 from me for a surefire tech startup that vanished into thin air. He never paid me back. It's beautiful, I said dryly. Does it come with a return receipt? You might need the write-off. Camila. Dad snapped. Don't be jealous. Just because your brother is generous and you count every penny. It's fine, Dad, Brad waved a hand magnanimously. Cammy's just stressed. It's hard being single at her age. It makes women bitter. I gripped the silver tray so hard my knuckles turned white. Bitter. That was their word for me. Not responsible. Not hardworking. Not the one who paid the property taxes on this estate for the last 3 years because Dad forgot. Just bitter. The party moved inside. The guests began to arrive, a sea of local elites, business partners, and old money socialites. I blended into the background, ensuring glasses were full, guiding guests to the coat check, playing the role they assigned me. But my mind was racing. The conversation I overheard earlier kept replaying in my head. Selling the house. Liquidity for Brad. I needed to know what kind of situation Brad was in. You don't sell a generational estate to pay off a credit card bill. This was big. Around 8 p.m., the dinner chimes rang. I was seated at the far end of the family table, next to Aunt Marge, who was partially deaf, and a cousin I hadn't seen in a decade. Brad, naturally, was seated between Mom and Dad at the head. Midway through the main course, filet mignon, medium rare, just how Brad liked it, Dad tapped his spoon against his wine glass. The room fell silent. Friends, family, Dad began, his face flushed with wine and pride. Thank you for being here to celebrate 40 years of tolerating each other. Polite laughter rippled through the room. But tonight isn't just about looking back. It's about looking forward. Linda and I have made a decision. We've decided it's time to downsize. To travel. To enjoy the fruits of our labor. He paused for dramatic effect. My heart hammered against my ribs. We have accepted an offer to sell the Vance estate, he announced. And we will be investing the proceeds into Bradley's new firm, Vance Global. We are passing the torch to the next generation of greatness. Applause broke out. Brad stood up, bowing theatrically. I sat there, frozen. They were actually doing it. They were announcing the sale of my house, to fund his fraud, in front of 100 witnesses. They hadn't even asked me. They hadn't even looked at me. I looked at Mom. She was beaming at Brad. Then her eyes slid to me. There was no apology in them. Only a cold challenge. Dare to say something, her eyes said. Dare to ruin this. I took a sip of water. The coolness soothed my parched throat. They thought they held all the cards. They thought the deed in Dad's desk drawer was the only one that mattered. They were about to learn a very painful lesson about property law and the power of a life estate deed. But first, I had to endure the speeches. And oh, the speeches were going to be the nail in their coffin. The applause for the house sale announcement eventually died down, replaced by the clinking of silverware and the murmur of impressed whispers. Vance Global, I heard someone say. Sounds impressive. If only they knew Vance Global was probably just a P.O. box in the Cayman Islands and a Wix website Brad built in 10 minutes. The dessert was served, creme brulee. Mom stood up again. She held a microphone, her other hand resting possessively on Brad's shoulder. I just want to say a few words about family, she began, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. Raising children is the hardest job in the world. You give them everything. Your youth, your money, your dreams. She looked down at Brad with adoration. Bradley, you were our first miracle. From the moment you were born, we knew you were destined for greatness. You were an easy child. Happy. Bright. You made us look good. The crowd chuckled. And then. Her gaze drifted down the table, past the wealthy investors, past the friends, landing on me at the far end. Her smile didn't fade, but it changed. It became tight. Pitying. Then we had Camila. The room went quiet. It wasn't an expectant silence, it was awkward. Camila was a surprise, Mom continued, her tone light, conversational, as if she were discussing a bad haircut she once had. We weren't planning on a second. Honestly, we were done. We wanted to travel by a boat. But, well, life happens. My chest tightened. I had heard variations of this story my whole life, but never with a microphone, never to an audience. I remember when she was born, Mom said, swirling her wine. She screamed for 3 months straight. Colic, the doctors said. But I think she just liked the sound of her own voice. Scattered, nervous laughter. And look at us now, she sighed. Brad is building empires. And Camila, well, Camila is very good at existing. She's distinctively average. But we love her anyway, don't we, Richard? Of course, Dad shouted from his seat. Someone has to keep the ground running while the rest of us fly. Exactly, Mom nodded. Then she leaned in closer to the mic, her eyes locking onto mine with a cruelty that took my breath away. You know, sometimes in our quiet moments, Richard and I talk. We look at where we could have been financially if we hadn't had the burden of a second child. The college tuitions for an art degree that went nowhere, the braces, the worry. She paused. The room was deadly silent now. Camila, honey, she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. We wish you were never born. Not because we hate you, but because, well, life would have been so much simpler. You were our biggest regret. But hey, at least you arrange flowers well. She laughed. It was a clear, bell-like sound. And then, slowly, the sycophants in the room started to laugh with her. They were uncomfortable, sure, but they were rich, and they followed the lead of the host. They were laughing at my existence. I sat there. I felt the heat rising up my neck, burning my cheeks. I looked at Brad. He was smirking, shaking his head as if to say, classic Mom. I looked at Dad. He was busy pouring more wine. And then, something inside me broke. It wasn't a loud crack. It wasn't a scream. It was a silent, clean break. The tether that had bound me to them, the desperate, childish need for their love, the hope that if I just worked hard enough, paid enough of their bills, fixed enough of their problems, they would finally see me, it snapped. The pain vanished. The embarrassment vanished. In its place, a cold, crystalline clarity washed over me. It was like stepping out of a humid, suffocating room into a freezing winter night. I felt sharp. I felt dangerous. I didn't cry. I didn't storm out flipping tables. I picked up my napkin, dabbed the corners of my mouth and stood up. The chair scraped against the hardwood floor, a harsh sound that cut through the laughter. The room quieted down, waiting for my reaction. Waiting for the tears. I looked at Mom. I smiled. A genuine, terrifyingly calm smile. Thank you for your honesty, Mother, I said. My voice didn't shake. It's liberating. I turned and walked away. Camila. Sit down. Don't be dramatic. Dad barked. It was a joke. Camila, where are you going? Mom called out, annoyed that her punching bag was walking offset. We haven't cut the cake. I didn't look back. I walked out of the ballroom, through the foyer, and up the grand staircase. I wasn't running away. I was going to my headquarters. I was going to Grandma Elena's old study. It was time to stop being the daughter. It was time to be the landlord. The third floor of the estate was quiet, a stark contrast to the cacophony of false laughter downstairs. This was the sanctuary. The air up here smelled of dust, old paper, and Grandma Elena's lavender perfume, which somehow still lingered in the drapes 5 years later. I entered her study, and locked the heavy oak door behind me. My hands were steady now. The snap had cauterized my nerves. I walked over to the large portrait of Grandma hanging above the fireplace. She had stern eyes, much like mine, but hers always held a glint of conspiracy when she looked at me. They are fools, Camila, she used to tell me. Your father sees the price of everything and the value of nothing. Guard your heart. And guard this house. I reached behind the frame and pressed the hidden latch. The panel slid open, revealing a wall safe. I spun the dial. Left to 0 for my birthday. Right to 18, the day she died. Left to 85, her age. Click. The heavy steel door swung open. Inside lay a thick leather portfolio and a velvet pouch. I took the portfolio to the desk and flipped it open. The documents inside were my shield and my sword. The deed. 5 years ago, 6 months before she died, Grandma summoned her attorney, Mr. Harold, and me. She knew Dad was eyeing the property market. She knew Mom wanted a condo in Miami. She knew they would sell the estate the moment she was in the ground. So she transferred the title to me. Inter vivos, a gift given during life. But there was a catch, a life estate clause for my parents. It stated that Richard and Linda Vance had the right to live in the property until their death, provided they paid for maintenance, insurance, and taxes. However, there was a termination clause. Subsection 4, paragraph B, if the life tenants attempt to sell, mortgage, or significantly alter the property without the remainderman's, my, written consent, or if they engage in conduct that publicly disparages or brings harm to the remainderman, the life estate is immediately revoked, and full possession reverts to the remainderman. Public disparagement. We wish you were never born. She is our biggest regret. Recorded on 100 smartphones, and the professional videographer's camera downstairs. They had just handed me the keys to their own eviction. But the deed wasn't enough. I needed to nuke Vance Global to ensure Brad couldn't drag the family name, and my credit, into the mud. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number. It was 9:15 p.m. Harold. I said when the line clicked open. Camila. The old lawyer's voice was raspy but alert. Is everything all right? It's late. It's happening, Harold. They announced the sale. Tonight. To fund Brad. A heavy sigh on the other end. The fools. Did they sign anything? I think they're trying to close with Sterling tonight. I saw him here. Sterling. The developer. Harold scoffed. He's a shark, but he's a lawful shark. If he knows the title isn't clear, he'll walk. Mom also just announced to the entire party that I was her biggest regret and a mistake. She what? Harold's lawyerly tone cracked. On record. Microphone. Video. Witnesses. That violates the morality clause of the trust stipend, Camila. And it certainly triggers the harassment clause in the life estate agreement we drafted. You have them. I know, I said, looking at the papers. Harold, I need you to send over the file on Brad. The one you compiled when he tried to forge Grandma's signature on those checks back in 2019. You're going to expose him. I'm going to bury him, I said. If I don't, he'll bankrupt them within a year, and they'll come crawling to me anyway. I'm cutting the rod out. Tonight. I'll email the dossier. It includes the recent judgments I found in Delaware and Nevada. He's not just broke, Camila. He's waiting on an indictment. Perfect. I hung up. My laptop was already open. I saw the notification from Sarah, my best friend and a cybersecurity specialist I'd texted earlier, when I saw Brad leave his laptop unattended in the living room before the party started. Sarah got in. It was barely protected. Password was CashKing1. You're not gonna believe this, Cammy. Check your email. I opened the file. It wasn't just debt. It was a Ponzi scheme. He was taking money from parents' friends, investing it in non-existent crypto wallets, and using it to pay off gambling debts in Vegas. And there was an email drafted to a loan shark named Vinny, dated yesterday, "Don't break my legs. Parents are selling the mansion this weekend. I'll have your $500,000 by Monday." My parents weren't investing in a business. They were paying a ransom. And they were willing to make me homeless to do it. I looked at the clock. 9:30 p.m. The cake cutting was at 10 p.m. I had 30 minutes to assemble the presentation of a lifetime. The blue light of my laptop screen was the only illumination in the study. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I wasn't just an architect tonight, I was a video editor, a forensic accountant, and an executioner. I opened the video file Sarah had sent. It was a screen recording of Brad's online gambling history. The numbers were staggering. -$15,000, blackjack, -$40,000, sports betting, -$120,000, transfer to Vinny_collects. Then, the legal documents Harold sent. A court summons from Nevada for check fraud. A cease and desist letter from the SEC regarding Vance Global. I organized the files into a folder named The Truth. But I needed more. I needed to connect it directly to Mom and Dad's betrayal. I needed to show that their love for Brad was actually enabling a criminal, while their regret for me was the only thing keeping a roof over their heads. I accessed the home security system. I had installed these cameras myself 2 years ago after a break-in scare. Mom and Dad never learned how to use the app, they just assumed it worked. I scrolled back through the footage from earlier this afternoon. Camera 04, the kitchen. Timestamp, 4:30 p.m. There was Mom, holding a glass of Chardonnay, talking to Brad. "Don't worry about Camila," Mom said on the recording. The audio was crisp. "We won't tell her until the papers are signed. Once the house is sold, she has 30 days to vacate. She can live in her car for all I care. She's resourceful like a cockroach." Brad laughed. "You're the best, Mom. She's such a buzzkill anyway. Does she really think she owns the place just because she wiped Grandma's chin? She thinks she's a martyr," Mom sneered. "But she's just a spinster with a trowel." I paused the video. Spinster with a trowel. I felt a cold tear slide down my cheek. Not from sadness, but from the sheer venom of it. I wiped it away instantly. That was the last tear. I dragged that clip into my project timeline. Next, I pulled up the financial records of the house. Property tax receipt 2023, paid by Camila Vance, $22,000. Property tax receipt 2024, paid by Camila Vance, $24,500. Roof repair invoice, paid by Camila Vance, $18,000. I took screenshots of the bank transfers from Dad's account to Brad's account. Transfer, $50,000, ref, business startup transfer, $30,000, ref, marketing costs transfer, $10,000, ref, Brad rent. They were bleeding themselves dry for him. They had drained their retirement accounts. Selling the house wasn't an investment strategy, it was a desperate attempt to avoid bankruptcy. I pieced it all together. Slide 1, the Vance Global, SEC warning. Slide 2, Brad's gambling losses. Slide 3, the security footage of them plotting to kick me out. Slide 4, the deed. The glorious, legally binding deed signed by Elena Vance, transferring the property to Camila Vance. Slide 5, the notice to vacate. I connected remotely to the AV system in the ballroom. The projector was currently running a slideshow of happy memories, photos of Mom and Dad in Paris, Brad graduating barely, Mom and Dad on a yacht. I located the file source. I uploaded my new video file, happy_anniversary_real_final.mp4. I set it to queue immediately after the current loop finished. I closed the laptop. I stood up and walked to the full-length mirror in the corner. I looked at myself. The black dress was modest, practical. The servant uniform. "No," I whispered. I walked over to the closet where I kept a few things. I pulled out a garment bag. Inside was a dress I had bought for an architecture awards gala last year, but never wore because Mom told me it was too flashy and trying too hard. It was crimson red. Silk. Tailored to perfection. It was a power suit in dress form. I stripped off the black dress and stepped into the red one. It fit like armor. I let my hair down from its tight bun, shaking out the waves. I applied a coat of dark red lipstick. I wasn't the daughter anymore. I wasn't the servant. I picked up the leather portfolio containing the physical deed. I was the landlord. And rent was due. The transformation was complete. I stared at the woman in the mirror and barely recognized her. The slumped shoulders were gone. The apologetic posture was gone. In their place stood a woman who owned millions of dollars in real estate and held the fate of 3 narcissists in her hands. I checked my phone. 9:50 p.m. 10 minutes until the speeches resumed for the cake cutting. I slipped my phone into my clutch and held the leather portfolio tight against my chest. As I walked down the 3rd-floor hallway, I passed my old bedroom. The door was open. I glanced inside. It was being used as a storage room for the party supplies. Boxes of extra napkins and wine cases were piled on my bed. They had literally turned my personal space into a warehouse. Another subtle reminder: you don't live here. You don't matter. I continued down the stairs. Halfway down to the 2nd floor, I ran into Jess, one of the catering staff I had hired. She was a sweet college student I'd worked with before. She looked up and her jaw dropped. "Ms. Vance? Whoa. You look amazing." "Thanks, Jess," I said. "Listen, are you running the AV booth right now?" "Yeah, I'm heading back there now." "Your dad wants the volume up for the toast." I reached into my purse and pulled out a $100 bill. "Jess, do me a favor. When I step up to the microphone, I need you to hit play on the file named real_final. Don't ask questions. Just play it. And make sure the volume is very high." Jess looked at the money, then at my determined face. She grinned. She had seen how my mother treated me all day. "You got it, boss. I'll make sure the bass is thumping." "Good girl." I descended the grand staircase. The noise of the party swelled up to meet me. Laughter, clinking glasses, the hum of expensive conversation. It sounded like the soundtrack to the Titanic just before the iceberg hit. I reached the bottom of the stairs and paused in the foyer. Through the archway, I could see the ballroom. Dad was holding court near the bar, laughing loudly at his own joke. Mom was showing off her diamond bracelet to a group of envious women. Brad was cornering Mr. Sterling near the buffet. I took a deep breath. This was it. The point of no return. If I did this, there was no going back to Peacekeeper. There would be no more Thanksgiving dinners. No more Christmas cards. I would be burning the bridge while they were still standing on it. I thought about the cockroach comment. I thought about biggest regret. "Burn it," a voice inside me whispered. "Burn it to the ground." I stepped into the ballroom. The effect was instantaneous. As I walked through the double doors, heads turned. The red dress was a beacon in a sea of black tuxedos and pastel cocktail gowns. It demanded attention. The chatter nearest to me died down, then rippled outward until a hush fell over a significant portion of the room. People weren't used to seeing Camilla Vance. They were used to seeing a shadow. I walked with a stride I had borrowed from the models on the runway, long, purposeful, unhurried. I headed straight for the center of the room. Mr. Sterling, the developer Brad was harassing, looked up and saw me. His eyes widened. He excused himself from Brad, who looked annoyed, and stepped into my path. "Camilla?" Mr. Sterling asked, blinking. "Is that you?" "Good evening, Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice projecting clearly. "I hope you're enjoying the garden. I redesigned the irrigation system myself last month." Yes, it's magnificent," he stammered, clearly impressed by the change in my demeanor. "Your brother was just telling me about the sale." "A shame. This place is a masterpiece." "Oh, don't worry about the sale, Mr. Sterling," I said loud enough for Brad to hear. Due diligence is a funny thing. Sometimes deals fall apart when you check the paperwork. Brad marched over, his face flushed with wine and irritation. Camila. What the hell are you wearing? You look like a showgirl. And you look like a defendant, Brad, I smiled sweetly. What? He recoiled. Nothing. Go find Mom. It's almost time for the cake. I brushed past him. I could feel his eyes boring into my back, confused and angry. He was used to me shrinking away from his insults. He didn't know how to handle a moving target. I made my way to the front of the room, near the stage. Mom saw me. Her eyes narrowed into slits. She broke away from her group and intercepted me. What do you think you're doing? She hissed, grabbing my arm. Her nails dug into my skin. I thought you left. And what is this costume? You're trying to upstage me at my own anniversary. I'm just here for the sequel, Mom, I said, gently but firmly removing her hand from my arm. You said the night was about family. I wanted to be part of the family. You are embarrassing us, she whispered venomously. Go change. Or better yet, go to the kitchen and make sure the coffee is ready. No, I said. She blinked, stunned. Excuse me. No, I repeated. I'm done making coffee. And I'm done being your regret. Before she could respond, the DJ, hired by Brad, naturally, announced, Ladies and gentlemen. Please gather round. It's time for the cutting of the cake and a final toast from the man of the hour, Richard Vance. The spotlight swung to the stage. Dad walked up, beaming. Mom had to paste a smile on her face and rushed to his side, shooting me one last warning glare. I stood right at the front, clutching my portfolio. I looked up at the projection screen behind them. Currently, it showed a photo of them cutting their wedding cake 40 years ago. Soon, it would show a bank statement. Dad tapped the mic. Thank you. Thank you. What a night. Before we cut this magnificent cake, I want to reiterate how proud I am. Proud of this house, proud of my wife, and proud of the future we are building with Vance Global. Cheers from the sycophants. And Dad continued, I want to thank my son, Brad. He's the visionary who made us realize that sitting on a pile of bricks is useless when you can turn it into gold. He raised his glass. To the sale. And to getting rid of the old to make way for the new. Getting rid of the old, Mom echoed, laughing. That was the trigger. Actually, Dad, I called out. My voice wasn't amplified, but in the momentary silence before the drink it carried. I stepped up onto the stage. The crowd murmured. This wasn't in the script. Camila, get down, Dad growled through his teeth, covering the mic. I walked past him and took the microphone from the stand. He was too shocked to stop me. I turned to face the crowd of 100 people. I saw Mr. Sterling. I saw the neighbors. I saw the people who had laughed at me 30 minutes ago. My father is right, I said into the mic. It is time to get rid of the old. It's time to clear out the rot. Cut the mic. Mom shrieked at the AV booth. But Jess didn't cut the mic. She gave me a thumbs up. But first, I said, looking at Brad, whose face was starting to pale. We need to clarify who actually owns the pile of bricks you're trying to sell. I signaled to Jess. Hit it. The room went dark. The spotlight on me remained, but the massive projection screen behind us flickered to life. The photo of the wedding cake disappeared. In its place, a massive, high-definition image of a quitclaim deed appeared. The text was blown up, but the highlighted sections were unmistakable. Grantor, Elena Vance. Grantee, Camila Vance. Date, October 12, 2019. A gasp rippled through the room. It started low and built into a wave of confusion. What is this? Dad shouted, turning around to look at the screen. He squinted. That's not real. Oh, it's very real, Richard, I said, my voice booming over the speakers. Grandma left the house to me. Not you. She knew you'd sell it the moment she died. So she gave it to me while she was still breathing. You thief. Mom screamed, lunging for me. You manipulated a dying old woman. I sidestepped her easily. I didn't manipulate anyone. I cared for her. While you were in Cabo. Remember? The screen changed. Slide 2. The video footage from the kitchen played. Mom on screen, she can live in her car for all I care. She's resourceful like a cockroach. Brad on screen, she thinks she's a martyr. But she's just a spinster with a trowel. The audio was deafening. The crowd gasped audibly. I saw Mrs. Higgins, the church gossip, cover her mouth with her hand. Mr. Sterling looked like he had swallowed a lemon. Mom froze. She stared at her own face on the screen, spewing hatred. The perfect mother mask shattered in real time. Turn it off. Brad yelled, rushing toward the AV booth. Kill it. Don't bother, Brad, I said coolly. We haven't gotten to your part yet. Slide 3. The gambling debts. The bank transfers. Minus $120,000 to Vinny_collects. SEC warning letter, fraudulent activity detected. You wanted to sell my house to pay off your bookie, Brad? I asked, turning to face him. He had stopped halfway to the booth, his face the color of ash. Did you tell Mom and Dad that Vance Global is just a fancy name for a Ponzi scheme? The room was in chaos. People were whispering, pointing. Dad was staring at the screen, reading the numbers. Brad? Dad's voice was weak. What is that $120,000 transfer? It's fake. Brad stammered, sweating profusely. She forged it. She's jealous. She's crazy. Mr. Sterling. I called out, pointing to the developer in the crowd. You're a smart man. Does that SEC letter look fake to you? Sterling stepped forward, his face grim. He looked at Brad. That's a docket number from the District of Nevada. I have a compliance officer who warned me about you this morning, son. I came here to verify it. He turned to Dad. Richard, the deal is off. I don't do business with felons. No. Mom wailed. Mr. Sterling, please. It's a misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding, Linda, I interrupted. It's an eviction. I opened the leather portfolio and pulled out the physical deed. I held it up. According to the life estate agreement, I said, reciting the clause I had memorized, any attempt to sell the property without my consent, or any public disparagement of the owner, that's me, results in the immediate termination of your right to live here. I looked Mom dead in the eye. You called me your biggest regret in front of everyone. You tried to sell my property behind my back. You broke the contract. I checked my watch. You have 30 minutes to pack a bag and get off my property. If you're not gone, the police, who are already on their way regarding Brad's fraud, will remove you for trespassing. The silence that followed was absolute. The music had stopped. The waiters had stopped serving. My mother looked at me. For the first time in her life, she didn't look down on me. She looked at me with fear. Camila. She whispered, her voice trembling. We're your parents. I smiled. The same smile I gave her when she broke my heart an hour ago. I know, I said. And that is my biggest regret. The silence that followed my 30-minute deadline wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating, the kind of silence that precedes a bomb blast. The projection screen behind me had gone black, but the image of the deed, and the evidence of Brad's fraud seemed to be burned into the retinas of every person in the ballroom. My mother, Linda Vance, was the first to break. She didn't scream this time. Instead, she let out a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob, a jagged, hysterical noise that made the guests flinch. "This is ridiculous," she announced, turning to the stunned crowd. Her voice was shaking, pitchy, desperate. She smoothed her emerald silk dress, but her hands were trembling so violently that her diamond bracelet, Brad's fraudulent gift, rattled against her wrist. "Everyone, please. My daughter is unwell. She's having an episode. You know how the artistic types are. High drama, low stability." She looked at me, her eyes pleading for me to play along, to just accept the role of the crazy daughter, one last time to save their social standing. "Camila," Dad joined in, stepping toward me with a forced, tight smile. "Put the papers away, honey. We can talk about this in the morning. Let's not ruin the party. Mr. Sterling is still here." I looked over at Mr. Sterling. The developer was already near the exit, speaking rapidly into his phone. He caught my eye, gave a curt nod of respect, and walked out the door. "Mr. Sterling is gone, Dad," I said, my voice amplified by the acoustics of the silent room. "And so is your deal. There is no money coming. There is no Vance Global. There is only this house, which I own, and you, who are currently trespassing." Brad, who had been paralyzed near the AV booth, suddenly surged forward. The alcohol and the adrenaline of being exposed had turned his fear into aggression. "You bitch," he screamed, charging up the stairs to the stage. "You hacked my computer. That's illegal. I'll sue you for defamation." The crowd gasped and scattered. Brad was red-faced, veins bulging in his neck. He looked ready to strike me. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I stood my ground, clutching the leather portfolio like a shield. "Defamation requires the information to be false, Brad," I said calmly. "Are you telling me you didn't transfer $120,000 to a known loan shark in Las Vegas yesterday?" He froze at the top of the stairs, his fist raised. The truth hung in the air between us. He lowered his hand, not because he wanted to, but because he realized 50 people had their phones out, recording. "I needed that money," he hissed, low enough that only I in the front row could hear. "Vinny is going to kill me. If they don't sell this house, I'm dead. Do you understand? You're killing your own brother." "No, Brad," I replied, feeling a pang of pity that was quickly extinguished by the memory of his smirk earlier tonight. "You killed yourself the moment you stole from the people who loved you. You drained Mom and Dad dry. You made them choose between their retirement and your gambling addiction. And they chose you. They were willing to throw me on the street to save you." I turned to my parents. "That's the reality, isn't it? You weren't selling the house to travel. You were selling it because you're broke. Brad spent it all." Mom's face crumbled. The arrogance, the entitlement, the socialite mask, it all melted away, leaving behind a terrified, aging woman. She slumped against the table where the anniversary cake sat, untouched. We thought the investment would pay off," Dad stammered, looking at his shoes. "He said he just needed a bridge loan. He said he would double it." "He lied, Dad," I said. "He's been lying for 10 years. And you let him because it was easier than admitting your golden child was a failure." I checked my watch. "You have 25 minutes left. I suggest you start packing. I've already called the police regarding the fraud, but I'm sure they'll be happy to assist with an eviction too." The mention of the police broke the spell. The guests began to move. It started as a trickle, a few embarrassed couples grabbing their coats, and quickly turned into a flood. No one wanted to be present when the cops arrived. They muttered awkward apologies, avoiding my parents' eyes. "So sorry, Linda, we have an early morning. Richard, give us a call when things settle down." Within 5 minutes, the ballroom was empty of guests. The only people left were the catering staff, who were watching with wide eyes, my family and me. You ruined it, Mom whispered, staring at the empty room. 40 years of building a reputation. Gone in an hour. You ruined it when you wished I wasn't born, I shot back. Now go upstairs. Pack your essentials. You can come back for the furniture later with a moving truck and a police escort. You can't do this, Dad blustered, trying to regain some authority. This is my house. I raised you here. And I paid the taxes here, I reminded him. I paid for the new roof. I paid for the boiler repair last winter when you were in the Bahamas. Grandma knew you wouldn't take care of it. That's why she gave it to me. I walked down the steps of the stage and approached them. I'm going to sit on the terrace, I said. I'm going to drink a glass of wine. When I come back inside in 20 minutes, I want you gone. If you are not gone, I will have you removed in handcuffs. Do not test me. I am not the daughter who seeks your approval anymore. I am the landlord who is evicting bad tenants. I turned my back on them and walked toward the French doors. Behind me, I heard Mom burst into loud, ugly sobs, and Dad shouting at Brad, asking if the gambling debts were real. The implosion had begun. I stepped out into the cool night air. The garden was quiet, smelling of jasmine and damp earth. I walked to the stone railing and looked out over the estate. It was mine. It was finally, truly mine. But my hands were shaking. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a cold ache in my chest. I poured a glass of wine from a forgotten bottle on a patio table and took a long sip. You did it, Grandma, I whispered to the stars. We got them. But the night wasn't over yet. The sirens were coming. The blue and red lights cut through the darkness of the driveway before the sound of the sirens even registered. I watched from the terrace as 3 cruisers rolled up the long gravel path, their lights reflecting off the perfectly manicured hedges I had trimmed myself. This wasn't just a domestic dispute call. Harold, my lawyer, didn't do things by halves. When he reported multi-million-dollar wire fraud and elder financial abuse, he made sure the cavalry came. I walked back inside. The scene in the foyer was chaotic. My parents were dragging suitcases down the grand staircase. Not just suitcases, they were shoving silver candlesticks, small paintings, and anything valuable they could grab into garbage bags. It was pathetic. They looked like looters in their own home. Brad was pacing by the front door, sweating profusely, holding his phone. Vinny, listen, there's a delay. A small legal hiccup. I just need. The heavy oak front door swung open. Sheriff Miller stood there, flanked by 2 deputies. Miller was a man who had known my family for 30 years. He had been to their Christmas parties. He looked at Richard and Linda with a mixture of pity and professional detachment. Richard. Linda, Miller nodded, touching the brim of his hat. Then his eyes landed on Brad. Bradley Vance. Sheriff. Dad dropped a garbage bag, the sound of silverware clattering against the marble floor echoing through the hall. Thank God you're here. My daughter has lost her mind. She's trying to kick us out of our own house. She's raving about some fake deed. You need to arrest her for trespassing and harassment. Sheriff Miller sighed. He walked into the foyer, his heavy boots loud on the stone. He looked at me. Evening, Camila. Evening, Sheriff, I said calmly. I assume Harold sent over the paperwork. He did. Just reviewed it in the car. Miller turned back to my father. Richard, the deed is legitimate. I checked with the county clerk myself on the way over. Camila owns the property. And under the terms of the life estate she showed us, you violated the residency clause. She has the right to ask you to leave. This is insane. Mom shrieked. She was clutching a porcelain vase to her chest like a baby. You're taking her side. We are the Vances. We built this town. And right now, you're disturbing the peace, Miller said sternly. But that's not the main reason we're here. He turned to Brad. Bradley Vance, step away from the door and put your phone down. Brad's eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit. I haven't done anything. This is a civil matter. We have a warrant for your arrest issued by the district attorney's office, Miller said, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. Wire fraud, check kiting, and identity theft. We also have a few questions about some investors you've been soliciting across state lines. No. Mom threw herself between Miller and Brad. He's a businessman. He's successful. This is a mistake. Ma'am, step aside or I will charge you with obstruction, Miller warned. One of the deputies gently but firmly moved Mom aside. She collapsed onto the bottom step of the staircase, wailing. It was a sound of pure grief, not for the house, not for me, but for the shattering of the illusion she had worshipped for 40 years. Brad didn't fight. He was a coward at heart. As soon as the cuffs clicked onto his wrists, he started crying. Big, heaving sobs. Dad. Do something. Brad pleaded as they marched him out the door. Call the governor. Call someone. Dad stood there pale and shaking. He looked at Brad, then he looked at me. For a second, I thought he might finally apologize. I thought he might realize the magnitude of his failure. Instead, he pointed a shaking finger at me. You did this, he spat. You destroyed this family. Are you happy now? Your brother is going to jail because of you. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes. He wasn't angry because I was wrong, he was angry because I had taken away his retirement plan. Without Brad's success, Dad was just an old man with no savings and no house. Brad is going to jail because he stole, I said. And you are leaving because you betrayed me. I didn't destroy this family, Dad. I just turned on the lights. I turned to the sheriff. Sheriff, can you please escort my parents off the property? Their 30 minutes are up. Miller nodded. Let's go, folks. You can grab your personal essentials, but the valuables stay until ownership is disputed or resolved in court. Put the vase down, Linda. Mom placed the vase on the floor with trembling hands. She looked at me one last time. Her eyes were filled with hate, but underneath it, there was a terrible, dawning realization of her own helplessness. Where will we go? She whispered. You have friends, I said, echoing the words she often used when dismissing my problems. I'm sure the Vances will be welcome anywhere. I watched as the police escorted them out. They walked out into the night, dragging their hastily packed suitcases, leaving behind the silverware, the paintings, and the daughter they never wanted. The heavy door clicked shut. I locked the deadbolt. I was alone. The house was massive, silent, and empty. But for the first time in 38 years, it didn't feel lonely. It felt clean. The days following the eviction were a blur of legal activity and strange, quiet peace. I took the week off work. I needed to perform an exorcism on the house. Not a spiritual one, but a physical one. I started with the guest wing, which my parents had occupied. I hired a team of movers to pack up the rest of their furniture and clothes. I had it all sent to a storage unit in town, and prepaid for 3 months. I sent the key to the cheap motel where they were staying. I wasn't heartless, I just wasn't a doormat anymore. Walking through their rooms was surreal. I found drawer after drawer of unpaid bills hidden beneath piles of cashmere sweaters. Final notices for credit cards, warnings from the country club about overdue dues. They had been drowning for years, keeping up appearances while sinking like a stone. And they were going to use me as the life raft. They were going to sell my sanctuary to buy themselves another year of pretending. On the third day, Harold came over. We sat in the sunroom, drinking iced tea. Well, Harold said, organizing a stack of files on the coffee table. It's a mess but a manageable one. Brad's bail was denied. He's a flight risk. The amount of fraud is staggering, Camila. He stole from everyone, including your grandmother's trust before she locked it down. I figured, I said, looking out at the garden. What about my parents? They've hired a lawyer, Harold chuckled dryly. Some strip mall guy. They're claiming elder abuse and undue influence regarding the deed. But it won't stick. We have the video of your mother's speech. We have the text messages. We have the financial records showing you paid for everything. No judge in this state will grant them residency after they publicly disowned you. I don't want them destitute, Harold, I said quietly. I just want them away from me. We can set up a small stipend from the remaining assets in the estate trust, assuming there are any after Brad's debts are settled, Harold suggested. But honestly, Camila, they have Social Security. They can rent a small apartment. They'll survive. They just won't be the Vances anymore. That was the crux of it. They were mourning their status, not their relationship with me. My phone rang constantly that week. Calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, demanding to know how I could be so cruel. How can you kick your own mother out? Aunt Marge screamed into my voicemail. They are old. They made a mistake. I didn't answer. I didn't explain. I blocked the numbers one by one. I realized that anyone who thought I was the villain in this story had never paid attention to the abuse I endured. They were enablers, and they were no longer welcome in my life. One evening, about 2 weeks later, I was painting the dining room. I wanted to cover the dark, oppressive wallpaper Mom loved with a bright, airy sage green. The doorbell rang. I checked the camera. It was Dad. He looked 10 years older. His suit was wrinkled. He wasn't standing tall, he was hunched over. I debated not answering. But I needed to look him in the eye one last time, without the chaos of the party. I opened the door but left the security chain on. Camila, he said, his voice cracking. Please. Can I come in? Just for a minute. No, Richard, I said. I couldn't call him Dad anymore. What do you want? Your mother, she's not doing well. She won't eat. She just cries. He looked up at me, his eyes wet. We made a mistake. We know that. But Brad, he manipulated us too. He told us he was in trouble. We were just trying to save our son. And to save him, you decided to sacrifice me, I said. That's the part you don't get. You didn't just sell a house. You looked at me and decided I was disposable. You wished I wasn't born. That was just talk, he pleaded. She was stressed. You know how she gets. I know exactly how she gets, I said. She gets cruel. And you let her. You stood there and poured wine while she stripped me of my dignity in front of 100 people. You laughed, Richard. I saw you. He flinched as if I had slapped him. We have nowhere to go, Cammy. The motel is awful. The beds are hard. Please. Just let us the guest house. We won't bother you. We'll be invisible. Invisible, I repeated. Like I was for 38 years. He went silent. You can't live here, I said firmly. Because every time I look at you, I feel small. And I'm done feeling small in my own home. You have your pension. You have each other. You have the golden child, whenever he gets out of prison in 10 or 15 years. Go be a family with him. I started to close the door. I loved you, you know, he whispered. In my own way. I know, I said, and I truly meant it. But your way wasn't good enough. Goodbye, Richard. I closed the door. I listened to his footsteps retreat down the gravel path. I slid down to the floor and cried. I cried for the father I wanted, not the one I had. I cried for the little girl who tried so hard to be perfect. But when the tears stopped, I stood up. I picked up the paint roller. I finished the wall. It looked beautiful. 6 months later. Spring had arrived in upstate New York, and the Vance estate, now simply called The Haven, was blooming. I walked through the garden, holding a cup of coffee. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of lilacs and wet grass. Things had changed. Drastically. Brad was currently serving a 7-year sentence in a federal correctional facility for wire fraud and embezzlement. Vance Global was dissolved. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that he was working in the prison laundry. It seemed fitting. He was finally learning how to clean up his own messes. My parents had moved to a small 2-bedroom condo in Florida. They stopped suing me once the money ran out. We don't speak. I send them a card at Christmas, no message, just a signature. It's my way of saying, I'm still here, and I'm still thriving, without opening the door to their toxicity. As for me, I quit my job at the firm. I didn't need the stress anymore. I converted the estate into a retreat for artists and landscape architects. I host workshops now. The ballroom where my mother humiliated me is now a studio space, filled with easels, drafting tables, and laughter. Real laughter, not the polite, mocking kind. I stood by the fountain, the place where I used to hide when Mom's criticism got too loud. I looked at the water rippling in the sunlight. I saw my reflection. I looked different. My hair was shorter, sharper. I wore colors now, bright yellows, deep blues. The black servant dress was long gone, donated to charity. A car pulled up the driveway. It was Sarah, my best friend, followed by a few other friends arriving for our weekly brunch. Cammy. Sarah waved, hopping out of her Jeep. I brought the bagels. And guess what? I saw a picture of your brother in the paper. Something about a prison reform program. He looks humbled. I laughed. Let's hope it sticks. We sat on the terrace, the same terrace where I drank wine alone on the night of the eviction. Now the table was full of food, friends, and conversation. You know, Sarah said, buttering a bagel. I was thinking about that night. It was terrifying, but it was also the coolest thing I've ever seen. You were like a superhero. The landlord. I wasn't a superhero, I said, smiling. I was just a woman who finally checked the paperwork. We laughed. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. That night wasn't about the deed or the money. It was about the realization that we teach people how to treat us. For decades I taught my family that I was cheap, available, and disposable. That night I taught them that I was expensive. That I was valuable. And that if you push me too far, I will push back. I looked up at the house. The windows were open, letting the breeze in. It didn't feel like a museum of the Vance family anymore. It felt like a home. My home. I thought about Grandma Elena. I hoped she was watching. I hoped she saw that I didn't just save the house, I saved myself. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the sweet, clean air of freedom. So, Sarah asked, pouring mimosas. What's the next project? You finished the garden. You finished the studio. What now? I smiled, raising my glass. Now? I said. Now I just live. And I think that's going to be my best work yet. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to relive, but I hope it gives even one of you the courage to stand up for yourself. You are not a mistake. You are not a regret. You are the protagonist of your own life. If you enjoyed this story, please comment the letter A below to let me know you made it to the very end, you guys are the real ones. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice and resilience. Take care of yourselves and remember, always read the fine print.